You have just woken up as a crocodile. For the next 2 hours, you're going to experience sneaky dawn hunts, fierce battles with rival crocs, and even days buried in dried-up mud. And this won't be easy, so good luck. But before we get into this journey of a crocodile, I'd appreciate it if you could subscribe, like the video, and leave a comment on where you're tuning in from and which animal you want me to cover next. Now, let's begin this epic adventure together. The river breathes with morning mist, pale wisps rising from dark water like the ghosts of ancient dreams. In this hushed hour before sunrise, when the world balances between night and day, something prehistoric stirs along the muddy banks. A ridge of weathered scales breaks the surface tension, barely disturbing the mirror-calm water. This is no fallen log drifting with the current. This is 4.5 meters of perfectly evolved predator, a saltwater crocodile who has claimed this stretch of river as his own for nearly 3 decades. His massive frame slides from the mud shelf with surprising grace, each movement deliberate and economical. The cold water embraces his belly scales like an old friend, sending ripples of sensation through nerve endings that have been fine-tuned over millions of years. There's something almost meditative about the way he settles into his element, nostrils positioned just above the waterline, eyes scanning the misty riverbank with the patience of geological time itself. The morning air carries messages that only he can decode. A white-necked heron calls from the reed beds upstream, its harsh cry echoing off the water. The crocodile's brain processes this information automatically, not a threat, not prey, simply another voice in the river's morning chorus. His hearing, far more acute than most realize, picks up the subtle splash of a barramundi jumping, the rustle of paperbarks swaying in the pre-dawn breeze, the distant grunt of a water buffalo somewhere beyond the mangroves. Territory. The concept runs deeper than mere geography in the crocodile's world. This kilometer-long stretch of river, with its perfect basking logs and hidden feeding channels, represents the sum total of his life's work. Every submerged rock, every overhanging branch, every muddy slide has been catalogued in his primitive but effective memory. He knows which fallen tree provides the best platform for morning sun, which deep pool offers the coolest retreat during the heat of midday, which narrow channel funnels unwary prey into striking distance. The boundaries of his domain have been negotiated through years of careful diplomacy and occasional violence. Upstream, perhaps 200 meters past the dead paperbark that leans into the water at an impossible angle, lives another male of similar size. They've maintained an uneasy truce for 5 years now, ever since their last serious confrontation left both scarred but neither clearly victorious. The memory of that encounter, the explosive collision of jaws, the thrashing death roll in muddy water, the taste of blood and scales remains fresh in the crocodile's mind. Such memories serve as effective deterrents against unnecessary conflict. Downstream, where the river widens into a series of lagoons connected by shallow channels, a younger male has recently established himself, perhaps 3 meters long, still growing, still testing his limits. The veteran crocodile has observed this newcomer with the dispassionate interest of an established monarch watching a distant pretender. No immediate threat, but worth monitoring. Youth brings aggression, and aggression brings unpredictability. The prime basking loga, massive mahogany trunk that fell during the cyclone season 2 years ago, sits empty in the morning mist. Its surface, polished smooth by countless hours of crocodile occupancy, catches the first pale rays of dawn filtering through the canopy. The crocodile knows this log intimately, knows exactly how its diameter fits the curve of his body, knows which end offers the best angle for surveying his territory while soaking up the sun's warmth. But first, the morning patrol. With movements that seem almost leisurely, the crocodile begins his slow circuit of the territorial boundaries. His powerful tail, thick as a man's torso, provides thrust with gentle undulations that barely disturb the water's surface. This is stealth perfected over evolutionary time, the ability to move through water with such minimal disturbance that even the most alert prey remains unaware of his presence until it's far too late. The riverbank scrolls past like a familiar movie. Here, the spot where a young boar came to drink 3 mornings ago, leaving hoofprints in the soft mud. There, the overhanging vine where flying foxes sometimes cluster during their evening flights, occasionally providing an opportunistic meal when one flies too low. Every detail has significance. Every change in the familiar landscape gets noted and filed away. His nostrils, positioned perfectly on the top of his elongated snout, sample the air with each breath. The morning breeze carries the green scent of new growth, the loamy smell of decomposing vegetation, the sharp metallic tang of the river itself. Somewhere upstream, the subtle musk of a water rat. Downstream, the familiar scent markers of the younger male's territory. No immediate threats, no obvious opportunities, just the steady rhythm of river life beginning another day. The crocodile's eyes, amber gold in the morning light, move independently as he surveys his domain. This dual-focus vision allows him to monitor multiple areas simultaneously, one eye tracking the movements of a green heron picking its way through the shallows, the other watching for any sign of territorial intrusion. His vision, contrary to popular belief, is remarkably acute both above and below water, fine-tuned for detecting the slightest motion that might indicate prey or threat. As the mist begins to lift, revealing the familiar geography of home, the crocodile completes his circuit and returns to the vicinity of his favored basking log. The sun, now visible through the canopy, promises another warm day, perfect conditions for the careful energy management that has kept him alive and dominant for 3 decades. He settles into the water beside his log, content to wait and watch as the river wakes up around him. This is the rhythm of his existence, patience punctuated by moments of explosive action, stillness broken by lightning-fast strikes, the eternal balance between energy conservation and opportunistic feeding. He is a living link to the Mesozoic era, a survivor from the age of dinosaurs, carrying within his genes the accumulated wisdom of 100 million years of successful predation. The morning patrol complete, territory secured, the ancient crocodile prepares for whatever opportunities the new day might bring. Riverbank breakfast. The sun climbs higher, burning away the last wisps of morning mist and revealing the river in all its muddy glory. Our crocodile has positioned himself in the shallows near a stand of pandanus palms, their spiky fronds creating a natural blind that conceals most of his massive bulk from potential prey. Only his eyes and nostrils remain visible above the surface, 4 dark points that could easily be mistaken for floating debris by the unwary. Patience. It's perhaps the most crucial skill in any predator's arsenal, and crocodiles have elevated it to an art form. He can remain motionless for hours, his metabolism slowed to a crawl, his muscular system locked in a state of relaxed readiness. Unlike the warm-blooded mammals that share his territory, he doesn't need to constantly feed to maintain his body temperature. His cold-blooded physiology allows him to function efficiently on surprisingly little fuel, but when opportunities arise, he must be ready to capitalize with devastating efficiency. The reed line 30 meters upstream has become a highway for morning traffic. A school of mullet, their silver sides flashing in the dappled sunlight, moves through the shallows in the unhurried manner of fish who believe themselves safe in numbers. The crocodile's brain performs rapid calculations: distance, angle of approach, probability of success. Too far for a guaranteed strike, too many potential escape routes. He remains still, a monument to predatory patience. A white-necked heron steps delicately along the muddy bank, its long neck extended as it searches for unwary fish in the shallows. The bird's movements are cautious but not panicked. Herons and crocodiles have coexisted in this ecosystem for thousands of years, each species well aware of the other's capabilities and limitations. The crocodile watches with mild interest, but doesn't shift position. Wading birds are challenging prey, quick to take flight at the first sign of danger, and the energy expenditure of a failed strike rarely justifies the attempt. Something larger moves through the paperbark forest beyond the far bank. The crocodile's hearing picks up the subtle sounds of a medium-sized mammal picking its way through the undergrowth, the soft pad of feet on leaf litter, the occasional snap of a twig, the rhythmic sound of breathing. His experience tells him it's likely a wallaby, possibly a young one, making its way to the water's edge for a morning drink. The mathematics of predation run through his primitive but effective brain. Wallabies are excellent prey, substantial enough to justify the energy expenditure of a strike, meaty enough to provide several days' worth of nutrition. But they're also quick, alert, and possessed of powerful hindquarters that can launch them to safety with a single bound. Success depends entirely on positioning, timing, and the element of surprise. The wallaby appears through the pandanus fronds, a young male with grey-brown fur and the characteristic liquid dark eyes of his species. He approaches the water with the cautious confidence of an animal that has successfully navigated this morning ritual dozens of times before. 3 quick sniffs of the air, a careful scan of the obvious hiding spots, then a gradual descent to the water's edge. The crocodile's entire body tenses, though externally he remains as motionless as a floating log. His heart rate increases slightly, pumping more blood to his massive jaw muscles. The nictitating membrania, transparent third eyelid that protects his eyes during underwater strike slides into position. His tail, coiled beneath him like a compressed spring, prepares for the explosive thrust that will launch nearly 500 kilograms of predator through the water. The wallaby lowers its head to drink, and in that moment of vulnerability, the crocodile strikes. The explosion of movement is breathtaking in its sudden violence, from perfect stillness to maximum velocity in less than a second. His massive jaws, capable of exerting over 3 tons of pressure per square inch, snap shut with the finality of a steel trap. The wallaby's surprised cry is cut short as those terrible teeth, designed not for chewing but for gripping, puncture hide and flesh. The strike creates a shockwave that radiates through the water, sending ripples across the previously mirror-calm surface. The mullet school scatters in silver panic, their synchronized swimming dissolving into individual desperation. The white-necked heron, startled by the sudden violence, launches itself skyward with harsh cries of alarm. But the crocodile's work is just beginning. The wallaby, though fatally wounded, still thrashes with the desperate strength of a creature fighting for its life. The crocodile's response is as ancient as it is effective, the death roll. With his prey firmly gripped in his jaws, he begins to rotate his entire body, using the wallaby's own weight and momentum against it. The spinning motion disorients the mammal while simultaneously drowning it, a technique that has been refined over millions of years of successful predation. The water around them turns muddy with disturbed sediment and darker with blood, but the crocodile's nictitating membrane allows him to see clearly throughout the process. His nostrils, equipped with powerful valves, seal shut automatically, while his throat contains a secondary palate that prevents water from entering his lungs. These adaptations allow him to remain submerged for extended periods while dealing with struggling prey. The wallaby's struggles gradually weaken and then cease entirely. The crocodile, still gripping his prize, swims toward deeper water where he can feed without interruption. But first, a curious ritual that has puzzled observers for generations. She deliberately swallows several smooth stones from the riverbed, adding them to the collection already present in his stomach. These gastroliths, as scientists call them, serve multiple purposes. They act as ballast, helping the crocodile maintain neutral buoyancy while feeding underwater. They also aid in digestion, grinding food in his stomach much like a bird's gizzard. But perhaps most importantly, they help generate the internal heat necessary for efficient digestion through the mechanical action of crushing and grinding. The feeding process itself is a marvel of evolutionary engineering. Unable to chew his food, The crocodile must swallow it in manageable chunks, often holding portions underwater until decomposition makes them more manageable. His stomach acid, with a pH level comparable to battery acid, can dissolve bone and horn with remarkable efficiency. The digestive process generates significant heat, raising his body temperature by several degrees and accelerating his metabolism for days or even weeks. As he settles into the deeper water with his prize, the crocodile embodies the perfect predator patient, efficient and utterly without mercy. The river gradually returns to its morning calm. The ripples fade, and the other inhabitants of his territory resume their cautious activities. But they all remain alert, aware that the apex predator of their world has just demonstrated once again why he has ruled this stretch of river for 3 decades. The sun continues its climb toward its zenith, and the crocodile's breakfast has been secured with the casual efficiency of a creature perfectly adapted to its environment. High sun hibernate. The tropical sun reaches its merciless peak, transforming the river into a mirror of molten silver and turning the air itself into a shimmering curtain of heat. For most of the river's inhabitants, this is the time of retreat into shade, into burrows, into the cooler depths where the sun's rays cannot penetrate. But for our crocodile, now satisfied from his morning meal, this blazing heat presents an opportunity rather than a challenge. He has claimed his favorite basking log, the massive mahogany trunk that fell 2 seasons ago, positioning his bulk along its sun-warmed surface with the precision of a creature who has perfected the art of thermoregulation over millions of years. His dark scales absorb the solar radiation like a living solar panel, converting the sun's energy into the warmth that will fuel his metabolism for days to come. The crocodile's mouth hangs open in what might appear to be a threatening display, but is actually a sophisticated cooling mechanism. This behavior, known as gaping, serves the same function as panting in mammals' excess heat is expelled through the moist surfaces of his mouth and throat. His pink tongue, surprisingly delicate for such a massive predator, lies flat against the floor of his mouth, its surface area maximized for heat dissipation. But the gaping serves another purpose as well. The crocodile's heart rate, normally around 20 beats per minute, drops even further as he enters a state of profound relaxation. His breathing becomes so shallow as to be almost imperceptible, each breath separated by long intervals of complete stillness. This is not sleep as mammals understand it, but rather a state of minimal metabolic activity that allows maximum energy conservation. The heat radiating from the log creates microcurrents in the air around him, and these tiny movements attract creatures that have learned to exploit the crocodile's apparent vulnerability. A small school of mouth-brooding catfish, each no larger than a human thumb, swims boldly into the cavern of his open jaws. These tiny cleaners, seemingly oblivious to the rows of teeth that could crush them instantly, begin their meticulous work of removing parasites and dead tissue from the crocodile's oral cavity. The relationship between cleaner fish and crocodile is one of the most remarkable examples of interspecies cooperation in the natural world. The fish receive a protein-rich meal of parasites and debris, while the crocodile enjoys the equivalent of a dental cleaning. The arrangement requires perfect trust. The fish must believe absolutely in the crocodile's restraint, while the crocodile must suppress millions of years of predatory instinct to allow these morsels to swim freely around his most sensitive areas. The crocodile's eyes, though appearing closed, remain partially open and alert. His vision, adapted for both aerial and aquatic environments, can detect the slightest movement even in this deeply relaxed state. A sacred ibis, its white plumage stark against the blue sky, lands on the log just inches from his massive head. The bird's confidence seems almost suicidal. It begins preening its feathers with the casual indifference of a creature that has completely assessed the threat level and found it manageable. This restraint is not born of lethargy but of intelligence. The crocodile has learned through decades of experience that unnecessary movement wastes energy, and energy is the most precious currency in his world. Every calorie saved through efficient thermoregulation is a calorie that can be used for growth, healing, or reproduction. The mathematics of survival have been calculated over millions of years of evolution, and the results are displayed in behaviors that might seem counterintuitive to observers expecting constant alertness from an apex predator. The ibis steps delicately along the log, its long curved beak probing the crevices in the bark for insects and larvae. Occasionally, it ventures close enough to the crocodile's head to investigate the rich ecosystem of the gaping mouth. Though it lacks the specialized adaptations of the cleaner fish and maintains a respectful distance from those formidable jaws. Beneath the surface, the crocodile's body is undergoing remarkable physiological changes. His digestive system, stimulated by the morning's meal, has shifted into high gear. The wallaby in his stomach is being broken down by acids strong enough to dissolve bone, while the gastroliths he swallowed earlier grind and crush the food into more manageable pieces. This digestive process generates significant heat, contributing to his overall body temperature and reducing his dependence on external warming. The heat also accelerates his healing processes. The minor scratches and abrasions accumulated during territorial disputes and feeding activities begin to close more rapidly in the elevated temperature. His scales, constantly being shed and renewed, grow more quickly in the warmth. Even his brain function, though operating at a minimal level, benefits from the increased temperature, maintaining the neural pathways that store his territorial knowledge and behavioral patterns. Hours pass in this state of meditative stillness. The sun tracks across the sky, and the crocodile occasionally adjusts his position to maintain optimal exposure to its rays. These movements are so subtle and infrequent that they barely disturb the cleaner fish continuing their work, or the ibis that has now settled into a comfortable roosting position on the log. The energy economy of this lifestyle is astounding. While a mammal of similar size might require dozens of pounds of food daily to maintain its body temperature and activity level, the crocodile can survive comfortably on a single large meal for weeks or even months. This efficiency allows him to occupy an ecological niche that would be impossible for warm-blooded predators of comparable size. The river around him continues its lazy flow, but the midday heat has driven most potential prey into shade or deeper water. The crocodile's patience extends beyond hunting, understands intuitively that the best opportunities often come during the cooler hours of dawn and dusk, when prey animals are most active. His current state of minimal activity is not passive waiting but active preparation, storing solar energy for the more demanding activities that will come with the evening hours. As the sun begins its gradual descent toward the western horizon, the crocodile's body temperature has reached its optimal level. His metabolism, though still operating at a reduced rate, is primed for more active behaviors when circumstances require them. The cleaner fish, their work complete, swim away to find other clients. The ibis, perhaps sensing some subtle change in the crocodile's demeanor, takes wing with a few powerful beats and disappears into the late afternoon haze. The great predator remains motionless on his log, a perfect fusion of biological efficiency and evolutionary success, ready to transition from this state of solar-powered hibernation to whatever challenges the cooling day might bring. Silent stalk. The afternoon sun has begun its descent toward the western horizon, casting longer shadows across the water and creating the perfect conditions for what crocodiles do best, the patient, methodical pursuit of prey. Our massive predator slides from his basking log with the fluid grace of flowing water, his 4.5 meters of ancient engineering disappearing beneath the surface with barely a ripple to mark his passage. The river corridor has awakened from its midday stupor. Insects drone above the water's surface, their wings catching the golden light. Fish begin to venture into the shallows, seeking the insects that fall from overhanging branches. And somewhere in the distance, beyond the fringe of paperbark trees and pandanus palms, the unmistakable sounds of a buffalo herd making their way to the water's edge for their evening drink. The crocodile's brain, primitive but perfectly adapted for this exact scenario, begins calculating possibilities. Buffalo represent the ultimate, prize-massive, protein-rich, capable of sustaining him for weeks or even months. But they also represent the ultimate challenge. Adult water buffalo can weigh over 800 kilograms, possess formidable horns, and travel in protective herds where multiple pairs of eyes scan constantly for danger. His approach begins with intelligence gathering. Submerged to eye level, he moves upstream with the patience of geological time itself, following the sound of lowing cattle and the splash of hooves in mud. The herd's location becomes clear. As he rounds a bend in the river, perhaps 20 animals scattered along a 100-meter stretch of muddy bank. From massive bulls with scarred hides to young calves staying close to their mothers, the mathematics of predation run through his mind like an ancient algorithm. Adult bulls are too large and dangerous, even for a crocodile of his size. Mature cows, while more manageable, remain formidable opponents with protective herd instincts. But there, at the edge of the group, a young bull perhaps 2 years old has separated himself from the main herd, drawn to a patch of sweet grass growing at the water's edge. The crocodile's approach is a masterclass in stealth. His powerful tail provides thrust with the barest minimum of movement, creating no disturbance on the surface. His body maintains perfect trim, neither sinking nor rising, moving through the water like a living submarine. The specialized placement of his eyes, nostrils, and earsaw positioned on the top of his skull him to maintain sensory contact with the world above, while remaining virtually invisible to his intended prey. The young buffalo, perhaps 150 kilograms of muscle and bone, continues his methodical grazing, unaware that death approaches with each passing second. The crocodile's periscope eyes track every movement, noting the animal's position relative to the water's edge, the angle of approach that will provide the best striking opportunity, the proximity of other herd members who might interfere with the attack. Distance closes with agonizing slowness. 50 meters, 40, 30. The crocodile's heart rate increases slightly, pumping more blood to his massive jaw muscles. His nostrils flare, taking in the scent of his prey mixed with the rich organic smells of the riverbank. The young buffalo's scent tells him everything he needs to know: healthy, well-fed, distracted by the sweet grass at his feet. 20 meters. The crocodile's massive form is now close enough that any sudden movement would be detected instantly. His approach becomes even more cautious, each movement calculated to disturb the water as little as possible. The young buffalo raises his head, chewing thoughtfully, dark eyes scanning the river's surface in a lazy, unfocused manner. The crocodile freezes, becoming as motionless as a floating log until the buffalo's attention returns to the grass. 15 meters, the striking distance. The crocodile's entire body tenses beneath the surface, his tail coiled like a compressed spring, his jaws slightly parted in preparation for the explosive lunge that will follow. The young buffalo takes another step closer to the water's edge, and then another, drawn by the promise of fresher vegetation growing in the shallows. The attack, when it comes, is a study in perfectly timed failure. The young buffalo, perhaps alerted by some primal instinct or some subtle change in the river's surface, raises his head at the exact moment the crocodile launches his strike. The massive jaws snap shut on empty air as the buffalo bounds backward with the explosive power of youth and terror. The crocodile's momentum carries him onto the muddy bank in a spectacular display of displaced water and flying mud. For a moment, 500 kilograms of apex predator lies stranded on dry land, his powerful tail thrashing as he struggles to return to his aquatic element. The young buffalo, now safely among the protective bulk of the herd, snorts and stamps his feet in the universal language of prey that has narrowly escaped death. But the crocodile's expression, if such a thing can be read in those ancient features, shows no frustration or disappointment. Failed strikes are simply part of the predatory equation, factored into the energy calculations that govern every aspect of his existence. He slides back into the water with the same fluid grace that marks all his movements, settling into the shallows to wait and watch. The buffalo herd, now alert to the presence of a predator, maintains greater distance from the water's edge. But they cannot abandon their need to drink indefinitely, and the crocodile's patience is legendary. He positions himself in a different location, upstream from the main group, where a natural depression in the bank creates a perfect ambush point. An hour passes. The sun continues its descent, painting the sky in shades of gold and amber. The buffalo herd's alertness gradually fades as no further threats materialize. Thirst eventually overcomes caution, and once again they begin to approach the water's edge, though with greater circumspection than before. A mature cow, heavy with calf, separates slightly from the main group. Her need for water is more pressing than the others, and she approaches a shallow section of the riverbank where the water runs clear over a bed of smooth stones. The crocodile, positioned downstream in the natural depression, begins his approach once again. This time, everything aligns perfectly. The cow, focused on the clear water before her, lowers her massive head to drink. The crocodile's approach is flawless, silent, invisible, inexorable. The distance closes to striking range, and this time there is no warning, no primal instinct to save his intended prey. The strike is devastating in its precision. The crocodile's jaws clamp down on the cow's muzzle with the force of a steel trap. The specially adapted teeth, designed not for cutting but for gripping, penetrating hide and flesh with surgical precision. The cow's eyes widen in terror and pain, but her struggles only serve to drive those terrible teeth deeper into her flesh. The death roll begins immediately. The crocodile's entire body becomes a weapon, rotating with the inexorable power of a machine designed for killing. The cow's massive weight works against her as the spinning motion drags her deeper into the water, away from the safety of the herd and into the crocodile's domain. The water around them turns dark with blood and muddy with disturbed sediment. The cow's struggles gradually weaken as drowning combines with blood loss to sap her strength. The crocodile's nictitating membrane protects his eyes throughout the process, while his specialized nostrils seal automatically to prevent water from entering his respiratory system. The herd, gathered at the water's edge, bellows in distress but cannot help their companion. The crocodile's position in deeper water makes any rescue attempt impossible, and their bovine instincts tell them that approaching the water now would only provide the predator with additional prey. Within minutes, the cow's struggles cease entirely. The crocodile, still gripping his prize, swims toward even deeper water, where he can feed without interruption. The evening hunt has concluded with the ancient success of perfectly applied predatory techniques, patience, positioning, and explosive power, combined in a display that has remained unchanged for millions of years. The river gradually returns to its evening calm, but the buffalo herd will remember this lesson. They will drink with greater caution, approach the water's edge with heightened awareness, and pass their hard-won knowledge to their young. The crocodile, meanwhile, has secured sustenance that will fuel his massive body for weeks to come, a testament to the efficiency of evolution's most successful predator. Breathing in the deep. The successful hunt has provided more than just sustenance. It has given our crocodile the luxury of time and the energy reserves necessary for one of the most remarkable physiological feats in the natural world. With his massive prey secured in the deeper waters of his territory, he begins the methodical process of preparing for an extended underwater retreat, a behavior that showcases the extraordinary adaptations that have allowed his species to survive virtually unchanged for over 200 million years. The crocodile's destination is a natural cave system carved into the riverbank by decades of seasonal flooding. The entrance, hidden beneath an overhanging shelf of consolidated mud and tree roots, appears as nothing more than a dark shadow to surface observers. But to the crocodile, it represents the ultimate sanctuaria, place where he can retreat from the world above and enter a state of suspended animation that borders on the miraculous. The cave system itself is a marvel of natural engineering, formed by the patient action of water over countless seasons. The main chamber, large enough to accommodate the crocodile's massive bulk, extends some 3 meters into the bank and opens into a smaller secondary chamber that serves as an emergency air pocket. The walls, polished smooth by the crocodile's repeated occupancy, are lined with a thin layer of beneficial bacteria that help maintain the delicate chemical balance of his aquatic environment. As he settles into the familiar confines of his underwater retreat, the crocodile's body begins a series of remarkable physiological changes that would be impossible for any warm-blooded creature. His heart rate, already slow by mammalian standards, drops to less than 5 beats per minute. His breathing becomes so infrequent that minutes pass between each subtle movement of his flanks. To an observer, he would appear to be in a state resembling death itself. But beneath this apparent stillness, his body is performing extraordinary feats of biological engineering. His cardiovascular system, already adapted for aquatic life, undergoes a dramatic reconfiguration. Blood flow to non-essential organs is reduced to a minimum, while vital organs like the brain and heart continue to receive adequate oxygenation through a network of specialized shunts and bypasses that can redirect circulation as needed. The crocodile's blood chemistry itself changes during these extended submersions. His red blood cells, already more efficient at carrying oxygen than those of most vertebrates, begin to release their stored oxygen with greater efficiency. His tissues, adapted over millions of years for exactly this situation, can function on dramatically reduced oxygen levels without suffering the damage that would quickly prove fatal to other animals. Lactic acid, the metabolic byproduct that causes muscle fatigue in other animals, is buffered and neutralized by his body's chemistry in ways that scientists are only beginning to understand. Where a mammal would experience the burning sensation of oxygen debt within minutes, the crocodile can maintain essential functions for hours without any apparent discomfort. The prehistoric nature of his physiology becomes apparent in these moments of extreme adaptation. His body contains evolutionary throwbacks to the archosaurs, the group of reptiles that gave rise to both crocodiles and dinosaurs. His heart, unique among reptiles, possesses a 4-chambered structure similar to that of birds and mammals, but with the added ability to shunt blood flow in ways that warm-blooded creatures cannot. His brain, often dismissed as primitive, demonstrates remarkable efficiency during these extended submersions. Neural activity slows to match his reduced metabolic rate, but critical functions like spatial memory and threat assessment remain active. He can detect vibrations through the water that might indicate the presence of prey or predators, process this information, and make decisions about whether to interrupt his rest period. The water temperature in the cave remains several degrees cooler than the surface, and the crocodile's body temperature drops accordingly. But rather than being detrimental, this cooling actually extends his ability to remain submerged by further reducing his metabolic requirements. His cold-blooded physiology, often seen as a disadvantage compared to warm-blooded mammals, becomes a distinct advantage in this environment. Time passes differently in the underwater cave. Minutes stretch into hours as the crocodile maintains his meditative state. Above, the river continues its daily cyclefish, schooling in the shallows, birds calling from the canopy, the distant sounds of the buffalo herd moving to new grazing areas. But none of these surface activities disturb the profound stillness of the cave. The crocodile's skin, covered in scales that are actually modified versions of the same structures that form bird feathers, continues to function as a sensory organ even in this reduced state. Specialized cells, called integumentary sense organs, detect the slightest changes in water pressure, temperature, and chemical composition. These sensors, distributed across his entire body surface, create a 3-dimensional map of his underwater environment, more detailed than any sonar system. His digestion continues at a reduced pace, the massive meal from his successful hunt being broken down by stomach acids that remain effective even at his reduced body temperature. The gastroliths in his stomach continue their grinding action, though more slowly than during his active periods. Nutrients from the buffalo cow will be absorbed and distributed throughout his body over the coming days and weeks, supporting growth, healing, and the maintenance of his massive muscular system. The cave's ecosystem has adapted to the crocodile's presence over the years. Small fish, taking advantage of the protection his presence provides, have established themselves in the deeper recesses of the chamber. These fish, too small to be considered prey, serve as an early warning system for any disturbances in the water chemistry or the approach of potential threats. Occasionally, the crocodile's eyes open slightly, the nictitating membrane sliding back to reveal amber irises that seem to glow in the filtered light of the cave. These moments of alertness are brief but complete in seconds. He can assess his environment, process any new information, and make decisions about whether to continue his rest or return to more active behaviors. The oxygen levels in the cave remain adequate thanks to the secondary air pocket and the slow circulation of water through the system. The crocodile's reduced consumption allows him to remain comfortable for extended periods, though his body maintains the ability to rapidly return to full activity if circumstances require it. As the day progresses above, the crocodile remains in his underwater sanctuary, a living demonstration of the adaptations that have allowed his species to survive every major extinction event in Earth's history. His ability to enter these states of suspended animation, to survive on minimal resources, and to remain hidden from the world above represents the ultimate in evolutionary success. The cave holds him in its dark embrace, and he holds secrets that span geological timber-living bridge between the ancient world of the dinosaurs and the modern ecosystem of the river. In this underwater cathedral, time itself seems suspended, and the crocodile rests in the profound stillness of evolutionary perfection. Territorial skirmish. The noon sun burns mercilessly overhead, its rays penetrating the water's surface and warming the river to temperatures that would be uncomfortable for most creatures. But for crocodiles, this heat represents opportunity, a chance to elevate their metabolism and prepare for the territorial disputes that inevitably arise when two apex predators share the same waterway. The challenger appears from upstream, moving with the confident swagger of a mature male who has recently established his own territory. At just over 4 meters in length, he is younger than our protagonist but still formidable. His hide bearing the scars of previous encounters and his muscles rippling beneath scales that gleam with the vitality of prime breeding condition. His approach is neither subtle nor accidental. This is a deliberate probe of territorial boundaries, a test of the older male's continued dominance. The established crocodile, resting in the shallows near his favored basking log, detects the intrusion long before visual contact is made. Vibrations through the water, carried by specialized pressure sensors along his jaw and body, alert him to the presence of another large predator. The signature of the movement too large to be prey, too regular to be debrisken, only mean one thing: a territorial challenge. His response begins with a low-frequency rumble that travels through the water like the voice of the river itself. These infrasonic communications, pitched below the range of human hearing, can travel for kilometers through the aquatic medium. The sound carries multiple messages, encoded in its duration, frequency, and intensity: a declaration of occupancy, a warning of consequences, and an assessment of the sender's physical condition, all rolled into one primal communication. The challenger's response is immediate and unmistakable. His own rumbling call echoes back across the water, equally low and threatening. But there are subtle differences that the experienced crocodile can interpret: slightly higher pitch, indicating younger vocal cords, shorter duration, suggesting less lung capacity, and an undertone of aggression that speaks of inexperience rather than confidence. The visual confrontation begins when the two massive predators are still 50 meters apart. Both rise slightly in the water, exposing more of their armored backs and the impressive bulk of their heads. This display, known as the high walk, serves multiple purposes. It demonstrates size and physical condition while positioning the crocodile for either attack or retreat depending on the opponent's response. The challenger's approach continues with calculated boldness. He moves in a series of short advances, each one testing the older male's response. Between each movement, he engages in a behavior that would be almost comical if it weren't so laden with menace. Powerful slaps of his tail against the water's surface that send spray flying and create explosive reports that can be heard for hundreds of meters. These tail slaps serve as both communication and intimidation. The force required to create such displays demonstrates the challenger's physical power, while the rhythmic nature of the slaps creates a drumbeat of aggression that other crocodiles in the area can interpret and respond to. Younger males might retreat to avoid becoming involved in a territorial dispute, while females might be attracted by the display of dominance. The established crocodile's response escalates gradually. His initial rumbles increase in frequency and intensity, while his body language becomes more overtly threatening. He turns to face the challenger directly, his massive head held high, his jaws slightly parted to reveal the impressive array of teeth that have served him well for 3 decades. His own tail slaps begin, each one more powerful than the challenger's, sending sheets of water cascading across the river's surface. The confrontation reaches its peak when the two males are separated by less than 20 meters. At this distance, the size difference becomes apparent. The challenger's 4 meters of length seems almost small compared to the veteran's 4.5 meters of scarred, battle-tested bulk. But youth brings its own advantages: faster reflexes, greater agility, and the desperate energy of a crocodile with everything to gain and nothing to lose. The actual combat begins with a rush that transforms the peaceful river into a battlefield. The challenger lunges forward with explosive speed, his jaws aimed at the older male's flank in an attempt to establish the grip that could determine the outcome of the entire encounter. But the veteran's experience serves him well. He twists aside with surprising agility for such a massive creature, and the challenger's teeth find only water and scales. The counterattack is swift and decisive. The older male's jaws snap shut on the challenger's middle section, his teeth penetrating the tough hide and drawing the first blood of the encounter. The challenger's response is immediate and violent, a powerful sweep of his tail that catches the veteran across the head, the impact creating a sound like a gunshot that echoes across the water. The two massive predators become a thrashing, rolling mass of scales and teeth and violence. The water around them turns muddy with disturbed sediment and dark with blood from multiple wounds. Their movements create waves that wash against the riverbank, disturbing the carefully maintained territories of smaller creatures and sending fish scattering in all directions. The death roll, that signature technique of crocodilian combat, becomes the primary weapon of both combatants. Each seeks to gain the grip that will allow him to spin his opponent into submission, but their roughly equal size and strength make sustained rolls difficult. Instead, the battle becomes a series of shorter rotations, each one designed to weaken the opponent's grip while maintaining one's own. The veteran's experience begins to tell as the battle continues. His movements become more economical, his attacks more precisely targeted. Where the challenger expends energy in spectacular displays of aggression, the older male conserves his strength for the moments when it can be most effectively applied. A lifetime of territorial disputes has taught him the value of patience, even in the midst of combat. The turning point comes when the challenger, perhaps tiring from his sustained aggression, allows the veteran to establish a superior grip across his back. The older male's jaws clamp down with the full force of his massive jaw muscles, and for a moment, the challenger finds himself at a potentially fatal disadvantage. But his youth and flexibility save him with a violent twist that must cause excruciating pain. He manages to break free, leaving behind a handful of scales and a considerable amount of blood. The brief separation allows both combatants to reassess the situation. The challenger, breathing heavily and bleeding from multiple wounds, faces the veteran, who appears less damaged but equally fatigued. The mathematics of territorial combat run through both prehistoric brains, the cost of continued fighting versus the value of the disputed territory. The resolution comes not with a decisive victory but with a gradual recognition of mutual respect. The challenger's retreat is not a rout, but a tactical withdrawal, his movements conveying acknowledgement of the older male's superior claim while maintaining his own dignity. The veteran allows this withdrawal without pursuit, his rumbling calls now carrying notes of triumph rather than threat. The aftermath of the battle transforms the immediate area into a testament to the violence that has just occurred. The water remains muddy for hours, while scattered scales and patches of blood mark the battlefield. Both combatants retire to separate areas to lick their wounds and recover from the enormous energy expenditure of their encounter. The established crocodile's victory is complete, but not without cost. The wounds he has sustained will take weeks to heal, and the energy expended in the battle will require additional hunting to replace. But his territorial boundaries have been reinforced, his dominance confirmed, and his reputation as a formidable opponent enhanced. The younger male, though defeated, has gained valuable experience and demonstrated his potential for future territorial acquisition. His wounds, though painful, will heal, and his strength will return. The river is large enough to support both predators, and time will determine whether future encounters will be necessary or whether the lessons learned today will suffice to maintain the delicate balance of crocodilian society. As the sun begins its descent toward the horizon, both combatants rest in their respective territories, their bodies already beginning the healing process that will restore them to full strength. The river flows on, carrying away the last evidence of their battle, while the eternal cycle of dominance and submission continues in the ancient rhythm of crocodilian life. Dry season countdown. The sun's angle has shifted subtly but significantly over the past weeks, and the river responds to this celestial change with the inevitability of a clock winding down. What began as a broad, flowing waterway has started its gradual transformation into a series of disconnected pools and muddy channels, each day revealing more of the cracked earth that will soon define the landscape for months to come. Our crocodile, wise with the accumulated experience of 30 dry seasons, recognizes the signs long before they become obvious to less experienced inhabitants of the river system. The water temperature, which rises incrementally each day as the reduced volume concentrates the sun's heat, tells him that the annual trial is approaching. The changing chemistry of the water, altered by concentration and the decomposition of stranded vegetation, carries messages that his primitive but effective brain can interpret with the accuracy of a meteorologist. The first casualties of the season begin to appear as the river's edges retreat. Fish that once swam in comfortable depths now find themselves trapped in ever-shrinking pools, their silver bodies flashing in increasingly desperate attempts to find deeper water. The smell of decomposition begins to permeate the air as the weaker specimens succumb to the combined stress of heat, oxygen depletion, and overcrowding. For the crocodile, this represents both opportunity and challenge. The dying fish provide easy meals that require minimal energy expenditure, but the changing water conditions mean that his extensive territory is about to be dramatically reduced. The kilometer-long stretch of river that he has dominated for decades will soon become a series of isolated pools, each one a potential prison if he chooses poorly. His response to this annual crisis demonstrates the evolutionary wisdom encoded in his DNA. Rather than attempting to defend his entire territory as it fragments, he begins a strategic retreat toward the deepest section of his domain, natural lagoon, formed by an ancient bend in the river's course. This depression, carved by countless years of seasonal flooding, retains water longer than any other section of his territory and will serve as his stronghold during the coming months of deprivation. The migration to the lagoon is a journey of perhaps 200 meters, but it represents one of the most critical decisions of the crocodile's year. The route takes him through increasingly shallow water, his massive bulk creating furrows in the mud that will remain visible long after the last water has evaporated. Other creatures, driven by the same instinct for survival, join this exodus to deeper water fish, turtles, water birds, and even the occasional water monitor lizard, all converging on the same life-giving destination. The lagoon itself is a marvel of natural engineering, roughly circular in shape and perhaps 50 meters across at its widest point. Its depth, crucial for survival during the dry season, reaches nearly 4 meters at its center, enough to accommodate the crocodile's massive bulk while providing the thermal stability that will be essential during the coming months. The water, though warming steadily, remains cooler than the surrounding shallows due to its volume and depth. But the lagoon is not unoccupied. The crocodile's arrival requires delicate negotiations with the other inhabitants who have already claimed space in this aquatic refuge. A large female, perhaps 3.5 meters in length, has established herself in the northern shallows along with her brood of juveniles from the previous season. Her tolerance for the massive male's presence depends entirely on his adherence to the unspoken protocols of dry season coexistence. The social dynamics of the lagoon are complex and ever-changing. Territorial boundaries that were absolute during the abundance of the wet season become fluid and negotiable when survival depends on sharing limited resources. The male's size and dominance earn him priority access to the deepest, coolest water. But he must balance this privilege with the need to maintain peaceful relations with the other inhabitants. The fish population in the lagoon has swelled dramatically as refugees from the shrinking river system seek shelter. Schools of barramundi, normally spread across kilometers of river, now circle in the confined space like living tornadoes. Smaller species catfish, perch, and various minnows fill every available niche, their abundance creating a rich feeding opportunity for the crocodiles lucky enough to have secured positions in the lagoon. The feeding strategy changes dramatically in this concentrated environment. The patient stalking that characterized the crocodile's hunting during the wet season becomes unnecessary when prey is so abundant and confined. Instead, he adopts a more opportunistic approach, taking advantage of the fish die-offs that occur with increasing frequency as the lagoon's ecosystem struggles to support its expanded population. The smell of decay becomes a constant companion as the weeks progress. Dead fish, their decomposition accelerated by the warm water, create an olfactory signature that can be detected for kilometers. This smell, while unpleasant to human sensibilities, serves as a dinner bell for the crocodiles, directing them to easy meals that require minimal energy expenditure to acquire. The crocodile's diet during this period becomes increasingly diverse. Along with the abundant fish, he takes advantage of the desperate behavior of mammals, forced to share the limited water source. Wallabies, feral pigs, and even the occasional water buffalo must overcome their natural wariness of the water's edge to satisfy their thirst, and the crocodiles wait with the patience of creatures who understand that desperation makes prey careless. The water level drops with mechanical precision, each day revealing more of the lagoon's muddy margins. The crocodile's basking opportunities become more limited, as the fallen logs and rocky outcroppings that once provided perfect thermoregulation platforms disappear beneath the receding waterline. He adapts by using the muddy banks themselves, though the soft substrate provides less efficient heat absorption than the solid surfaces he prefers. The changing chemistry of the lagoon presents additional challenges. The concentration of waste products, combined with the decomposition of organic matter and the reduced oxygen levels caused by overcrowding, creates conditions that would be toxic to most aquatic life. But the crocodile's robust physiology, evolved over millions of years to survive exactly these conditions, allows him to thrive where other creatures merely survive. His behavior becomes increasingly energy conservative as the dry season progresses. Movements are reduced to the absolute minimum required for feeding and territorial maintenance. The spectacular displays of aggression that characterized his interactions during the wet season are replaced by more subtle communications, gentle nudges, positioning, and the occasional low rumble that carries for hundreds of meters through the dense water. The social hierarchy within the lagoon stabilizes as the inhabitants adapt to their reduced circumstances. The large male maintains his dominance through presence rather than action, his massive bulk serving as a constant reminder of his status. The female and her juveniles occupy the marginal areas, while smaller crocodiles position themselves according to their place in the complex social matrix that governs dry season survival. As the weeks turn to months, the lagoon transforms from a temporary refuge into a miniature world, complete with its own ecosystem, social structure, and survival strategies. The crocodile, now the undisputed master of this aquatic kingdom, settles into the rhythm of dry season life, a rhythm that has remained unchanged for millions of years and will continue long after the current inhabitants have returned to the earth that bore them. The countdown to the dry season's peak continues with the inexorable precision of geological time, and the crocodile waits with the patience of a creature who has learned that survival depends not on fighting the inevitable, but on adapting to it with the wisdom of evolutionary experience. Survival in mud. The lagoon that once provided sanctuary has become a memory, its life-giving waters reduced to a series of mud puddles that reflect the merciless sun like broken mirrors. The transformation has been gradual but inexorable, each day revealing more cracked earth where water once lapped against the banks. Now, in the depths of the dry season, the crocodile faces the ultimate test of his species' legendary survival abilities. The last remnants of the lagoon have concentrated into a depression barely large enough to accommodate his massive bulk. The water, thick with sediment and organic matter, has become more mud than liquid, its surface covered with a skin of algae and decomposing vegetation that must be broken each time he needs to breathe. The smell of decay is overwhelming, a thick, organic miasma that speaks of death and transformation in equal measure. But the crocodile's response to this apparent catastrophe demonstrates the evolutionary wisdom that has allowed his species to survive every major extinction event in Earth's history. Rather than attempting to seek water elsewhere, he begins the process of creating his own microenvironment, a strategy that his ancestors perfected during the age of dinosaurs. The excavation begins with systematic movements of his massive tail and powerful limbs. Each sweep removes mud and debris, gradually deepening the depression that will serve as his refuge during the months of drought ahead. The work is exhausting in the heat, but it is performed with the methodical precision of a creature who understands that survival depends on preparation rather than luck. The resulting burrow is a marvel of instinctive engineering, shaped to accommodate his 4.5 meters of length and nearly 2 meters of width. It provides just enough space for him to remain covered by the minimal moisture that seeps from the deeper layers of mud. The walls, compressed by his repeated movements, form a surprisingly effective barrier against the sun's desiccating rays. The mud itself becomes his salvation. Unlike the dry earth that surrounds the former lagoon, the mud retains moisture through capillary action and the gradual release of groundwater from deeper layers. His body, pressed into this natural cocoon, can absorb water directly through his skin, supplementing his internal reserves without the need for drinking. The process of entering aestivation, the dry season equivalent of hibernation, requires precise physiological adjustments that would be impossible for warm-blooded creatures. His heart rate drops to less than 2 beats per minute, so slow that minutes pass between the subtle movements of his chest. His breathing becomes virtually imperceptible, each breath separated by intervals that would cause unconsciousness in any mammal. His eyes, those amber windows to an ancient consciousness, develop a protective film that shields them from the drying effects of the air, while maintaining enough transparency to detect changes in light that might indicate the approach of danger or the return of rain. The nictitating membrane, normally used for underwater vision, now serves as additional protection against the harsh conditions of his mud tomb. The metabolic changes that occur during estivation are profound. His digestive system, already efficient at extracting maximum nutrition from minimal food, essentially shuts down, preserving the energy that would normally be used for processing food. His liver, that remarkable organ that serves as his body's chemical factory, begins converting stored fats into the energy needed to maintain essential life processes. His blood chemistry undergoes dramatic alterations. The concentration of urea, normally toxic to most vertebrates, increases to levels that would be lethal to other animals. But the crocodile's kidneys and liver have evolved to not only tolerate these concentrations, but to use them as a means of water conservation, creating a biological antifreeze that prevents cellular damage during the extreme conditions of estivation. The mud burrow becomes a complete ecosystem in miniature. The moisture that his body creates through respiration helps maintain the humidity levels necessary for his survival, while the organic matter decomposing in the mud provides a rich environment for the bacteria and microorganisms that will help maintain the chemical balance of his temporary home. His position in the burrow is carefully calculated. His head, positioned slightly higher than his body, ensures that any rainwater that might collect will flow toward his mouth. His tail, coiled beneath him, serves as both a source of stored energy and a tool for minor adjustments to his position without requiring major movements that would waste precious energy. The sensory world of the estivating crocodile is reduced but not eliminated. His hearing, particularly sensitive to low-frequency sounds, remains alert to the vibrations that might indicate the approach of danger. His pressure-sensitive organs, distributed across his body, can detect changes in barometric pressure that herald the approach of the wet season's first storms. Days pass in a twilight state that is neither sleep nor wakefulness, but something entirely unique to creatures that have mastered the art of suspended animation. His consciousness, reduced to its most basic elements, maintains awareness of his environment while minimizing the energy expenditure required for complex thought processes. The heat above his mud refuge is brutal, reaching temperatures that would quickly prove fatal to most vertebrates. But his position below the surface, insulated by the mud and his own reduced metabolic rate, maintains a core temperature that allows essential life processes to continue. His scales, designed to minimize water loss, become even more effective in the dry conditions, creating a nearly impermeable barrier against dehydration. Occasionally, the burrow receives unexpected visitors. A large monitor lizard, driven by the same desperation that affects all of the region's wildlife, discovers the depression and the few remaining scraps of organic matter that the crocodile was unable to consume before beginning his estivation. The lizard's presence registers in the crocodile's consciousness, but the energy cost of movement outweighs the threat posed by the scavenger. The monitor's meal consists of the desiccated remains of fish and other aquatic creatures that died during the lagoon's final days. The lizard's approach brings it within striking distance of the buried crocodile, but the massive predator's response is limited to a slight movement of his eyes and a barely perceptible adjustment of his position. The monitor, either unaware of the danger or confident in the crocodile's torpid state, continues its scavenging undisturbed. This interaction illustrates the profound energy conservation that characterizes successful estivation. Every movement, every physiological response is weighed against its energy cost. The crocodile's primitive but effective brain calculates that the small lizard poses no real threat and that the energy required to eliminate it would be better preserved for more critical needs. The mud around him gradually hardens as the last moisture evaporates, creating a natural sarcophagus that will protect him from the worst effects of the dry season. His body heat, reduced to its minimum level, prevents the mud from hardening completely against his skin, maintaining the flexibility necessary for the eventual emergence that will come with the first rains. The burrow represents more than just a survival strategy. It is a testament to the evolutionary perfection of a creature that has remained essentially unchanged for over 200 million years. In this humble depression, in the dried earth, the crocodile carries within his genes the accumulated wisdom of countless generations that have survived similar trials through the same combination of preparation, adaptation, and sheer biological resilience. Time moves differently in the mud tomb. Hours stretch into days, days into weeks, as the crocodile's body maintains its essential functions on the barest minimum of energy. Above him, the sun continues its relentless assault on the landscape. But below, in the protective embrace of his mud cocoon, he waits with the patience of geological time for the rains that will eventually come. First, rain breaks. The first hint of change comes not through sight or sound, but through the subtle pressure waves that penetrate deep into the earth where the crocodile lies entombed in his mud cocoon. His primitive but extraordinarily sensitive nervous system detects the barometric shift hours before the first clouds appear on the horizon, dropping pressure that speaks of massive atmospheric disturbances, gathering strength somewhere beyond the visible world. The change begins as a tremor through the hardened mud, vibrations so faint that they barely register in his consciousness. But millions of years of evolution have fine-tuned his species' ability to detect these harbingers of salvation. His heart rate, dormant at barely 1 beat per minute, increases almost imperceptibly. Chemical signals cascade through his reduced nervous system, beginning the complex process of awakening from his months-long torpor. The sky above, invisible to him but sensed through the electromagnetic changes that precede major weather systems, has begun its transformation from the harsh blue of drought to the ominous grey-black of approaching monsoons. The first clouds, towering cumulus formations that climb toward the stratosphere, carry within them the promise of billions of gallons of life-giving water. The sound, when it finally comes, penetrates the earth like the voice of awakening gods. Thunder, deep and resonant, rolls across the landscape in waves that shake the ground and send vibrations through every particle of soil and rock. The crocodile's body responds with involuntary muscle contractions, the first significant movements he has made in weeks. His primitive brain, emerging from its state of suspended animation, begins to process the implications of what he is experiencing. The pressure changes intensify, and with them comes the first moisture in the air since the dry season began. The crocodile's specialized sensory organs, capable of detecting humidity changes of less than 1%, register the approaching transformation. His respiratory rate, virtually non-existent during the depths of estivation, begins to increase in preparation for the energy expenditure that emergence will require. The first drops of rain, fat and warm from their journey through the superheated atmosphere, strike the earth above his burrow with the force of small explosions. Each impact sends tiny shock waves through the hardened mud, creating a percussion symphony that speaks of deliverance to every creature that has survived the dry season's trial. The crocodile's body responds with a surge of hormones that begin the process of returning his systems to full operational capacity. The rain intensifies with startling rapidity, transforming from scattered drops to a steady downpour that drums against the earth with increasing intensity. The sound, muffled by the layers of mud above him, nonetheless penetrates his consciousness with the clarity of a signal that has been anticipated for months. His limbs, stiff from weeks of immobility, begin to respond to neural commands that prepare him for the monumental effort of breaking free from his earthen prison. The water, when it finally reaches him, arrives as a thin trickle that seeps through the hardened mud and touches his scales with the gentleness of a long-awaited caress. The sensation triggers a cascade of physiological responses that have been held in check for the duration of his estivation. His kidneys, operating at minimal capacity for months, begin to process the accumulated waste products that have built up in his system. His liver, that remarkable organ that has sustained him through the drought, begins to convert stored fats back into the energy needed for active life. The emergence itself is a process that unfolds over hours rather than minutes. The crocodile's powerful limbs, operating on muscle memory encoded over millions of years of evolution, begin the systematic breakdown of his mud cocoon. Each movement is carefully calculated to conserve energy while maximizing the effectiveness of his escape. His claws, worn smooth by the abrasive mud, nonetheless find purchase against the hardened walls of his burrow. The mud, softened by the penetrating rainwater, begins to yield to his efforts. Chunks of hardened earth, some weighing several kilograms, are displaced by the methodical movements of his massive body. His breathing, still slow but increasing in frequency, creates small bubbles in the mud that surrounds his head, indicating the gradual restoration of his respiratory function to normal levels. The first breakthrough comes as his massive skull breaks through the surface of what was once the lagoon's deepest point. The sensation of air moving freely across his scales, of rain striking his head directly, triggers responses that are part relief and part primordial joy. His eyes, protected by their natural film throughout the months of burial, clear to reveal the transformed world above. The landscape that greets his emergence is almost unrecognizable. Where once lay cracked earth and scattered bones, now spreads a shallow lake that grows larger with each passing minute. The rain, falling with tropical intensity, has transformed the depression into a temporary sea that reflects the lightning-split sky in its dark surface. The air itself seems alive with moisture, carrying sense of rebirth and renewal that his sensitive nostrils process with something approaching euphoria. His emergence continues with deliberate precision. His massive body, reduced by months of fasting but still formidable, rises from the mud like a prehistoric resurrection. The coating of hardened earth that clings to his scales creates a temporary armor that must be shed through careful movement and the cleansing action of the rain. Each scale, cleaned by the downpour, reveals the olive-green coloration that marks him as one of the river's most successful predators. The transformation of his environment continues at an accelerating pace. The rain, now falling in sheets that reduce visibility to mere meters, fills every depression and creates new channels where none existed before. The sound of rushing water begins to compete with the thunder as temporary streams carve new paths through the landscape, all of them leading toward the growing lake that surrounds him. Other survivors begin to emerge from their own refuges. Fish, buried in the mud of dried pools, wiggle to the surface as the water reaches their hiding places. Frogs, dormant in underground chambers, begin their celebratory chorus as the rain triggers their own emergence from estivation. The air fills with the sounds of an ecosystem awakening from its imposed dormancy. The crocodile's movement through this reborn environment is a masterpiece of prehistoric grace. His powerful swimming strokes, rusty from months of disuse, gradually regain their fluid efficiency as muscle memory reasserts itself. The water, warm from the heated earth and fresh from the sky, embraces his body with the familiarity of a long-lost home. The current, created by the runoff from higher ground, carries him downstream toward the main channel of the river. His journey is not passive drift, but purposeful navigation, following the strengthening flow toward the deeper waters that will become his hunting grounds for the coming wet season. The rain continues to fall, each drop a promise of abundance after months of privation. As he swims through the growing flood, the crocodile's body continues its resurrection. His heart rate increases to support the greater activity, his breathing deepens to provide the oxygen needed for sustained movement, and his digestive system begins to prepare for the feast that the returning rains will inevitably provide. The ancient rhythms of his species, interrupted by the drought but never broken, resume their eternal cycle. The rain shows no sign of abating, and the crocodile feels the prehistoric satisfaction of a creature perfectly adapted to exploit the opportunities that such abundance provides. His territory, fragmented by the drought into scattered refuges, begins to reunify as the rising water reconnects the isolated pools and channels that will once again form his domain. The resurrection is complete, and the river's apex predator has returned to claim his rightful place in the ecosystem's hierarchy, ready to face whatever challenges and opportunities the new wet season will bring. Love calls underwater. The wet season has settled into its rhythm, transforming the previously parched landscape into a lush aquatic paradise where life explodes in every conceivable form. The river, now swollen with runoff from the surrounding hills, flows with the confident power of a waterway restored to its full potential. For our crocodile, this abundance represents more than just the return of hunting opportunities. It marks the beginning of the most crucial period in his biological calendar. The first signs of the breeding season manifest not in his behavior, but in his biochemistry. Hormones that have remained dormant during the dry season begin to surge through his system, triggering changes that will transform him from a solitary predator into a creature driven by the most fundamental of all biological imperatives. His already impressive bulk seems to increase as improved circulation brings more blood to his muscles, while his scales take on a deeper, more vibrant coloration that speaks of prime breeding condition. The territorial boundaries that were meaningless during the drought suddenly become critically important. The crocodile begins a systematic patrol of his expanded domain, marking key locations with scent glands that communicate his presence and reproductive status to any potential rivals or mates. These chemical signatures, undetectable to most creatures, carry complex information about his size, age, health, and genetic fitness, a biochemical resume that will be evaluated by every female in the area. His vocalizations change as well, becoming deeper and more resonant as the breeding season approaches. The low-frequency rumbles that once served primarily as territorial warnings now carry additional messages encoded in their duration, pitch, and harmonic content. These calls, pitched below the range of human hearing, can travel for kilometers through the water, creating a communication network that spans the entire river system. The female appears during one of his evening patrols, her presence announced by a subtle change in the water's chemistry that his sensitive nostrils detect from hundreds of meters away. She is a magnificent specimen, nearly 4 meters in length, her scales bearing the subtle scarring that indicates successful reproduction in previous seasons. Her approach is neither aggressive nor submissive, but carries the confident wariness of a creature evaluating a potential mate. The courtship begins with a complex underwater ballet that has remained essentially unchanged for millions of years. The male's initial approach is cautious, his massive bulk moving through the water with surprising grace, as he positions himself to display his size and condition to best advantage. His movements are deliberate and ritualized, each gesture carrying meaning that has been refined over evolutionary time. The female's response is equally measured. She neither flees nor approaches directly, but instead begins a series of movements that test his intentions and evaluate his fitness. Her own vocalizations, higher in pitch but no less complex than his, carry information about her reproductive readiness and genetic quality. The underwater conversation that ensues is a masterpiece of biological communication, each call and response adding layers of meaning to their developing relationship. The male's courtship displays intensify as the female's interest becomes apparent. His body movements become more elaborate, incorporating elements that showcase his strength and agility. He performs underwater barrel rolls that demonstrate his muscular control, creates powerful currents with his tail that show his swimming ability, and produces bubble streams that rise to the surface in silvery columns. These bubble displays serve multiple purposes in crocodilian courtship. The male's ability to create and control them demonstrates his respiratory capacity and overall health, while the visual spectacle they create provides the female with information about his coordination and motor skills. The bubbles themselves, released with precise timing, create underwater light, shows that can be seen for considerable distances in the clear water. The female's evaluation process is thorough and methodical. She circles the male at varying distances, her movements designed to test his responses and gauge his temperament. Aggressive males, while potentially providing strong genes, also pose risks to both the female and her future offspring. The ideal mate must balance strength with restraint, dominance with compatibility. The water around them becomes a stage for increasingly elaborate displays. The male's powerful tail creates whirlpools and currents that demonstrate his control over his aquatic environment, while his precise movements through complex underwater maneuvers showcase the coordination that will be essential for successful mating. Each display is both a demonstration of fitness and a promise of genetic quality. The female's responses become more encouraging as the courtship progresses. Her vocalizations shift to frequencies that indicate increasing interest, while her body language suggests a growing acceptance of the male's advances. She begins to mirror some of his movements, creating a synchronized underwater dance that represents the first stages of pair bonding. The tactile phase of courtship begins when the female allows the male to approach close enough for physical contact. His initial touches are gentle explorations with his snout, testing her responses and gauging her readiness. Her acceptance of these contacts represents a crucial threshold in the courtship process, indicating that she has evaluated him as a suitable genetic partner. The gentle nudging that follows is a remarkable display of restraint from a creature capable of crushing bone with his jaws. The male's movements are slow and deliberate, each touch carefully controlled to avoid triggering any defensive responses from the female. His massive head, normally a weapon of devastating effectiveness, becomes an instrument of surprising tenderness. The female's responses guide the progression of their courtship. Her vocalizations shift to even more accepting frequencies, while her body language becomes more receptive to his advances. The careful positioning that follows allows both animals to assess each other's commitment to the mating process while maintaining the option of withdrawal if compatibility proves inadequate. The underwater environment enhances every aspect of their courtship. The buoyancy provided by the water allows for movements that would be impossible on land, while the acoustic properties of the aquatic medium carry their vocalizations with remarkable clarity. The play of light filtering through the water creates an ever-changing backdrop for their elaborate displays. The male's bubble releases become more frequent and elaborate as the courtship intensifies. These underwater pyrotechnics, created by the controlled release of air from his respiratory system, create streams of silver that spiral toward the surface in patterns that seem almost choreographed. The female's responses to these displays indicate her growing acceptance of his courtship efforts. The water chemistry itself becomes part of the courtship process. The pheromones released by both animals create a complex biochemical environment that influences their behavior and physiology. These chemical signals, undetectable to most other creatures, carry information about genetic compatibility, reproductive readiness, and individual fitness that supplements the visual and auditory components of their courtship. The extended nature of crocodilian courtship serves multiple biological functions. The prolonged evaluation period allows both animals to assess each other's fitness and compatibility, while the complex displays provide opportunities for demonstrating the genetic quality that will be passed on to their offspring. The patient, methodical approach ensures that mating occurs only when both partners are optimally prepared for reproduction. As the courtship reaches its culmination, the water around them seems to pulse with the rhythm of their synchronized movements. The ancient dance of crocodilian reproduction, refined over millions of years, reaches its crescendo in the warm, life-giving waters of the tropical river. The male's powerful form and the female's graceful acceptance create a tableau that speaks to the eternal continuity of life itself. The successful completion of their courtship represents more than just the mating of two individual sitmarks, the continuation of a genetic lineage that stretches back through geological time to the age of dinosaurs. In the gentle currents of the river, surrounded by the sounds and scents of the wet season, the ancient rhythms of reproduction ensure that the species will continue its remarkable journey through evolutionary time. Nesting vigil. The successful courtship has triggered a transformation in the female that goes far beyond the simple act of mating. Her body, now carrying the genetic legacy of both parents, begins the remarkable process of preparing for one of nature's most carefully orchestrated reproductive strategies. The male, his biological imperative satisfied, could simply return to his normal territorial activities, but evolution has programmed him for a more complex role in the continuation of his species. The female's search for the perfect nesting site begins with a methodical survey of her territory that can span several kilometers of riverbank. Her criteria are specific, and demanding the location must be close enough to water to provide easy access for the hatchlings, but far enough away to avoid flooding during the wet season's peak. The soil must be well drained, yet retain enough moisture to maintain proper incubation conditions, and the site must offer some protection from the numerous predators that view crocodile eggs as a prized delicacy. The chosen location, when she finally selects it, appears unremarkable to human eyes: a slight rise in the ground, perhaps 30 meters from the water's edge, shaded by a grove of pandanus palms, and covered with the decomposing vegetation that will provide the heat necessary for incubation. But to the female's experienced assessment, it represents the optimal balance of all the factors that will determine the success or failure of her reproductive effort. The nest construction begins in the early morning hours when the air is cool and the work less taxing. Using her powerful limbs and muscular tail, she begins excavating a depression in the soft earth, her movements precise and methodical. The initial hole, roughly circular and about 2 meters in diameter, will serve as the foundation for the complex structure that will house her eggs for the next 3 months. The female's construction technique demonstrates the remarkable precision that evolution has built into her reproductive behavior. She scrapes away soil and vegetation with her claws, then uses her snout to fine-tune the contours of the nest chamber. The depth is critical too shallow, and the eggs will be vulnerable to temperature fluctuations and predators. Too deep, and they may not receive adequate oxygen or drainage. As the excavation progresses, she begins incorporating organic matter into the nest structure. Fallen leaves, rotting vegetation, and small pieces of wood are carefully positioned to create a composting system that will generate the heat necessary for incubation. Her selection of materials is not random. She chooses vegetation in specific stages of decomposition, creating a biological furnace that will maintain consistent temperatures throughout the incubation period. The male's role during this construction phase is that of a watchful guardian rather than an active participant. His massive bulk, positioned strategically between the nest site and the water's edge, serves as a deterrent to the numerous predators that are drawn to nesting areas by the scent of fresh eggs. His presence alone is often sufficient to discourage smaller predators, while his vigilance ensures that larger threats are detected and dealt with before they can pose a danger to the developing clutch. The actual egg-laying process is a marvel of biological engineering that occurs over several hours during the warmest part of the day. The female positions herself carefully over the prepared nest chamber, her body forming a protective canopy over the precious cargo she is about to deposit. The eggs themselves, each about the size of a chicken egg, but with a leathery shell that allows for gas exchange, are laid in carefully arranged layers. The clutch size varies depending on the female's age, size, and nutritional status, but typically ranges from 20 to 60 eggs. Each egg represents a significant investment of the female's energy and resources, containing not only the developing embryo, but also the yolk that will sustain it throughout the incubation period. The careful spacing of the eggs within the nest ensures that each receives adequate heat and oxygen while minimizing the risk of damage from shifting organic matter. The temperature control system that governs egg development is one of nature's most sophisticated examples of biological engineering. The decomposing vegetation generates heat through bacterial action, while the female's careful selection of materials ensures that the temperature remains within the narrow range necessary for successful development. Too cool, and the eggs will fail to develop. Too warm, and the embryos will die from overheating. But temperature control serves another crucial function in crocodilian reproduction. It determines the sex of the developing offspring. This phenomenon, known as temperature-dependent sex determination, means that eggs incubated at temperatures below 30 degrees Celsius will produce females, while those above 34 degrees Celsius will produce males. The optimal temperature range of 31–33 degrees Celsius produces a mixed clutch, ensuring genetic diversity in the population. The female's monitoring of the nest temperature is constant and sophisticated. Using specialized thermoreceptors in her snout, she can detect temperature variations of less than half a degree Celsius. When adjustments are necessary, she adds or removes organic matter, repositions the eggs, or even uses her body to shade the nest during the hottest parts of the day. The male's protective vigil intensifies as the eggs begin their development. His patrols of the nesting area become more frequent and systematic. His senses alert to any sign of potential threats. The list of predators that consider crocodile eggs a delicacy is extensive. Monitor lizards, pythons, wild pigs, birds of prey, and even other crocodiles all pose serious risks to the developing clutch. The most persistent threat comes from the large monitor lizards that inhabit the riverbank. These intelligent and agile predators are skilled at locating nests and can excavate eggs with remarkable efficiency. The male's response to their presence is swift and decisive. His massive jaws can crush a monitor lizard's skull with a single bite, and his territorial aggression during the nesting period makes him particularly dangerous to any creature that ventures too close to the nest site. The female's dedication to her maternal duties is absolute. She rarely leaves the immediate vicinity of the nest, feeding opportunistically on small prey that ventures within striking distance, but never allowing herself to be drawn away by more substantial hunting opportunities. Her body weight gradually decreases as the demands of constant vigilance and reduced feeding take their toll, but her commitment to the nest never wavers. The nest itself becomes a complex ecosystem as the weeks progress. The decomposing vegetation attracts insects, which in turn attract small predators, creating a miniature food web centered around the incubating eggs. The female's presence maintains the balance of this system, preventing any single species from becoming numerous enough to pose a threat to the developing embryos. The changing chemistry of the nest provides the female with information about the progress of incubation. Her sensitive nostrils can detect the subtle changes in gas composition that indicate healthy embryonic development, while variations in the decomposition process alert her to potential problems that might require intervention. As the incubation period progresses, the male's territorial behavior becomes even more pronounced. His deep, rumbling calls warn potential intruders that the area is under the protection of a mature, aggressive male in full breeding condition. These vocalizations, carrying for kilometers through the water and surrounding forest, create an acoustic territory that extends far beyond the immediate vicinity of the nest. The coordination between male and female during this period represents one of the most sophisticated examples of parental cooperation in the reptilian world. While the female provides the direct care and monitoring that the eggs require, the male's protective presence ensures that her efforts are not interrupted by predators or competing crocodiles. Together, they create a defensive system that maximizes the chances of successful reproduction. The nest site becomes the center of their world during these crucial months, a small patch of earth that represents the culmination of millions of years of evolutionary refinement. The patient vigil continues day and night, a testament to the powerful biological drives that ensure the continuation of one of Earth's most successful predator species. Babies in the teeth. The first sounds of hatching reach the parents as a chorus of high-pitched chirps that pierce the morning air like the calls of exotic birds. These vocalizations, produced by the baby crocodiles while still enclosed in their leathery shells, serve as both a signal of readiness and a plea for assistance. The timing is crucial. Hatchlings have depleted their yolk sacs and must emerge within hours or perish from suffocation and starvation. The female's response to these distress calls is immediate and instinctive. Her massive bulk, which has maintained a protective vigil over the nest for nearly 3 months, springs into action with surprising agility. Her powerful limbs begin the careful excavation of the nest chamber, each movement precisely controlled to avoid damaging the delicate eggs that contain her offspring. The decomposing vegetation that has served as an incubator is systematically removed, revealing the pale, leathery shells that house the next generation. The male's role in this critical phase transforms from distant guardian to active participant. His massive head, normally a weapon of devastating effectiveness, becomes an instrument of remarkable gentleness as he assists in the excavation process. His powerful jaws, capable of crushing bone with ease, are now employed with surgical precision to help free the struggling hatchlings from their shells. The hatching process itself is a marvel of biological coordination. The baby crocodiles, each about 20 centimeters in length, use a specialized egg tooth to break through their shells from the inside. This temporary structure, which will be shed within days of hatching, allows them to create the initial crack that will eventually spread to free them from their temporary prison. The process can take several hours for each hatchling, requiring both patience and assistance from the parents. The sight of a massive crocodile delicately helping to free its offspring challenges many preconceptions about reptilian parental care. The male's enormous jaws, each tooth longer than the entire body of a hatchling, work with incredible precision to remove pieces of shell and clear away debris. His tongue, surprisingly mobile and sensitive, helps position the babies and guide them through the hatching process. The female's maternal instincts reach their peak during this phase. She uses her snout to help crack stubborn shells, her powerful limbs to clear away vegetation, and her surprisingly gentle mouth to lift and reposition struggling hatchlings. Her vocalizations during this period are unlike any other sounds in her repertoire: soft, low-frequency rumbles that seem to calm the babies and coordinate their emergence. The hatchlings themselves are perfectly formed miniature versions of their parents, complete with the instinctive behaviors that will be essential for survival. Their coloration, bright yellow with black stripes, serves as both camouflage and a signal to their parents that they are young and defenseless. Their eyes, disproportionately large for their head size, are already alert and responsive to movement and changes in light. The most remarkable aspect of the hatching process is the transport of the babies to water. The male, despite his enormous size and fearsome reputation, becomes a living nursery as he gently gathers the hatchlings in his massive jaws. His throat pouch, normally used for regulating body temperature, becomes a temporary carrying case that can accommodate dozens of baby crocodiles safely. The journey to water is a carefully orchestrated procession. The male, moving with exaggerated care to avoid jarring his precious cargo, leads the way to the shallows where the hatchlings will spend their first vulnerable weeks. His mouth, held slightly open to allow the babies to breathe, creates a protective chamber that shields them from potential predators while providing a secure means of transport. The female follows closely behind, her attention focused on any hatchlings that might fall from the male's mouth or become separated from the group. Her maternal instincts are at their peak, and she will aggressively defend the babies against any perceived threat. Her normally efficient predatory behavior is temporarily suspended in favor of protective vigilance. The aquatic nursery, when they finally reach it, is a shallow lagoon connected to the main river by a narrow channel. The location has been carefully selected to provide optimal conditions for the hatchling's early development: warm, shallow water, with plenty of cover and abundant small prey. The parents' knowledge of their territory ensures that this nursery area offers the best possible combination of safety and resources. The release of the hatchlings into water is as carefully controlled as their collection from the nest. The male lowers his massive head into the shallows and gently opens his jaws, allowing the babies to swim free into their new environment. Each hatchling emerges with the instinctive knowledge of how to swim, dive, and hunt, their behavior patterns encoded in DNA that stretches back millions of years. The immediate aftermath of their release is a flurry of activity as the babies explore their new world. Their movements are quick and erratic, driven by the need to find food and establish their place in the aquatic environment. Small fish, aquatic insects, and crustaceans become their primary prey, and their hunting instincts are immediately apparent despite their tiny size. The parents' protective behavior continues even after the hatchlings have entered the water. Both male and female position themselves strategically around the nursery area, their massive presence serving as a deterrent to the numerous predators that view baby crocodiles as easy prey. Birds of prey, large fish, pythons, and even other crocodiles all pose serious threats to the vulnerable hatchlings. The male's protective instincts extend beyond mere physical presence. His deep, rumbling calls warn potential predators that the area is under the protection of a mature, aggressive male. These vocalizations, carrying for kilometers through the water, create an acoustic territory that extends far beyond the immediate vicinity of the nursery. Any creature that ignores these warnings does so at considerable risk. The feeding behavior of the parents during this period becomes focused on providing opportunities for the hatchlings. The male's hunting activities are conducted with an awareness of the baby's needs, often leaving portions of his prey in the shallow water where the hatchlings can scavenge. This behavior, known as provisioning, ensures that the babies have access to food sources they could not obtain through their own hunting efforts. The social dynamics of the nursery are complex and fascinating. The hatchlings naturally form loose groups, their safety enhanced by the collective vigilance of their siblings. Their vocalizations, a constant chirping that sounds almost bird-like, serve multiple purposes, maintaining group cohesion, signaling distress, and communicating with their parents. The female's attention to individual hatchlings is remarkable for a reptile often characterized as primitive. She recognizes the distress calls of her offspring and responds with protective behavior that can include physical intervention against threats. Her massive jaws, normally used for crushing prey, become instruments of rescue as she gently retrieves hatchlings that have wandered into dangerous situations. The growth rate of the hatchlings is impressive, their bodies adding length and weight with each passing day. Their initial bright coloration begins to fade as they develop the more subdued tones that will provide better camouflage as they mature. Their behavior becomes more sophisticated as they learn to coordinate their movements and respond to their parents' signals. The male's role as protector continues throughout the hatchling's most vulnerable period. His presence in the nursery area is constant, his vigilance unwavering. The sight of a massive crocodile surrounded by dozens of tiny replicas of himself represents one of nature's most touching displays of parental devotion, challenging assumptions about the emotional capacity of reptilian brains. The nursery period, lasting several weeks, represents the most critical phase in the hatchling's development. The protection and guidance provided by both parents during this time significantly increases their chances of survival in a world filled with dangers. The ancient bond between crocodilian parents and their offspring, refined over millions of years, continues to ensure the species' remarkable success in surviving every major extinction event in Earth's history. Nightly patrol. The moon hangs like a silver coin in the star-scattered sky, its light transforming the river into a mirror of liquid mercury that reflects the ancient dance of celestial bodies. This is the crocodile's realm in its purest form, a world where darkness provides cover, where the subtle sounds of nocturnal activity create a symphony of opportunity, and where his perfectly adapted senses give him every advantage over creatures that dare to venture into his domain. The night patrol begins with the methodical precision that characterizes all aspects of his existence. His massive form glides through the water with movements so fluid they seem choreographed by nature itself. The ripples that spread from his passage are minimal, carefully controlled to avoid alerting potential prey or announcing his presence to territorial rivals. His eyes, positioned atop his skull like twin amber beacons, catch and reflect the moonlight with an intensity that would be visible from considerable distance to any creature unfortunate enough to meet his gaze. The transformation of his hunting grounds under cover of darkness is profound. The river that appeared peaceful and almost pastoral during daylight hours now reveals itself as a complex ecosystem where predator and prey engage in their eternal struggle for survival. The sounds that emerge from the darkness, the splash of a fish jumping, the rustle of vegetation as something moves through the reeds, the distant call of a night bird are all processed by his acute hearing and catalogued according to their potential significance. His reflective tapetum lucidum, the mirror-like layer behind his retinas, amplifies the available light to create vision that is remarkably effective in conditions that would leave most creatures virtually blind. This adaptation, shared with other nocturnal predators, allows him to detect movement and assess potential prey with startling accuracy, even in the darkest conditions. The world he perceives is painted in shades of silver and shadow, where every movement creates patterns that his prehistoric brain can interpret with deadly precision. The pressure-sensitive organs that dot his snout and lower jaw, invisible to casual observation but extraordinarily sensitive to the slightest disturbance in the water, create a three-dimensional map of his aquatic environment. These remarkable structures, called integumentary sense organs, can detect the movement of a swimming fish from dozens of meters away, the subtle pressure waves created by a drinking animal at the water's edge, or the telltale vibrations of another crocodile entering his territory. The night brings with it a different cast of characters than those active during the daylight hours. Fruit bats, their membranous wings creating distinctive patterns against the star-filled sky, begin their nightly migration from roosting sites to feeding areas. Occasionally, one flies too low over the water, its echolocation system apparently failing to detect the motionless predator waiting beneath the surface. The crocodile's response to these opportunities is lightning-fast a vertical leap that propels his massive bulk partially out of the water, his jaws snapping shut with the finality of a steel trap. The successful capture of a fruit bat provides more than just nutrition. It demonstrates the remarkable versatility of a predator often thought of as purely aquatic. The crocodile's ability to launch himself from the water with such force and accuracy speaks to the power contained within his muscular frame and the sophistication of his sensory systems. The bat, weighing perhaps 200 grams, represents a relatively small meal for such a massive predator, but the night offers many such opportunities for the patient hunter. A water rat, its fur glistening with moisture as it navigates the reedy shallows in search of aquatic invertebrates, becomes the next focus of the crocodile's attention. The small mammal's movements create distinctive pressure waves that register clearly on the predator's sensitive lateral line system. The rat's confident swimming suggests familiarity with this environment, but its confidence is misplaced. It has entered the hunting ground of a creature that has perfected the art of aquatic predation over millions of years. The approach is a masterpiece of stealth. The crocodile's body sinks lower in the water until only his eyes and nostrils remain above the surface, creating a profile so low that it becomes virtually invisible against the dark water. His powerful tail provides thrust with movements so subtle they create no disturbance on the surface, while his muscular control allows him to maintain perfect trim without the slightest deviation from his chosen course. The rat's fate is sealed by its own behavior. Intent on capturing the small fish that dart through the shallow water, it fails to notice the approaching death that glides toward it with the inexorable patience of geological time. The strike, when it comes, is over so quickly that the rat has no opportunity to comprehend what has happened. One moment, it is swimming confidently through familiar waters. The next, it has vanished into the massive jaws of the river's apex predator. The consumption of the rat follows the same methodical pattern that characterizes all of the crocodile's feeding behavior. Unable to chew his prey, he must position it carefully in his mouth before swallowing it whole. The process requires precise coordination between his jaw muscles and his pharyngeal pumping mechanism, while his nictitating membrane protects his eyes from the struggles of his dying prey. The night patrol continues with the steady rhythm of a creature that has perfected the art of energy-efficient hunting. His movements through the water are economical, each stroke of his powerful tail calculated to provide maximum propulsion with minimum effort. The mathematics of predation run constantly through his primitive but effective brain. The energy cost of pursuit versus the caloric value of potential prey, the probability of success against the effort required, the risk of injury weighed against the necessity of feeding. The river's nocturnal community includes creatures that pose their own unique challenges to the crocodile's hunting strategies. A large python, its muscular coils creating distinctive patterns in the water as it swims from one bank to another, represents both potential prey and potential competition. The snake's size, perhaps 4 meters in length, makes it a substantial meal, but its powerful constricting ability and venomous bite create risks that must be carefully evaluated. The crocodile's assessment of the python demonstrates the complex decision-making processes that govern predatory behavior. His approach is more cautious than usual, his movements designed to test the snake's awareness and reaction time. The python, equally alert to the presence of a potential threat, adjusts its swimming pattern to maintain distance while continuing its journey across the river. The standoff continues for several minutes before both predators, apparently deciding that the risks outweigh the potential benefits, separate and continue their respective hunts. The reflection of stars on the water's surface creates a constantly changing pattern that would be distracting to most creatures, but serves as a navigational aid for the crocodile's highly developed spatial memory. His knowledge of every rock, every fallen log, every change in depth throughout his territory allows him to move with confidence even in the darkest conditions. The celestial display above provides additional reference points that help him maintain his bearings during extended patrols. The sounds of the night create an acoustic landscape that is as rich and complex as any visual scene. The crocodile's hearing, far more acute than most people realize, processes this symphony of natural sounds with remarkable discrimination. The splash of a jumping fish can be distinguished from the sound of a drinking animal, the rustle of wind through vegetation from the movement of a potential prey animal, the call of one bird species from another, based on subtle differences in frequency and duration. A family of wild pigs, their grunting communication clearly audible from the riverbank, approaches the water's edge for their nightly drink. The crocodile's interest is immediately. Peaked pigs represent substantial prey that could provide sustenance for days or even weeks. His approach must be perfectly timed and executed, as the pig's keen senses and quick reflexes make them challenging prey even for such an accomplished predator. The hunt requires all of his accumulated experience and skill. The pig's positioning at the water's edge provides limited opportunities for attack, while their group behavior means that any assault must be swift and decisive to prevent the intended prey from being warned by its companions. The crocodile's approach is a slow-motion ballet of predatory precision, each movement calculated to bring him within striking range without alerting his quarry. The night air carries the scent of the pigs clearly to the crocodile's sensitive nostrils, providing information about their health, stress levels, and positioning. His chemical analysis of their scent signatures helps him select the most vulnerable individual, a younger pig, that has positioned itself slightly apart from the main group. The mathematics of predation favor this choice, as the animal's smaller size and isolated position maximize the probability of a successful strike. The attack, when it finally comes, transforms the peaceful night scene into explosive violence. The crocodile's powerful thrust from the water creates a geyser of spray that catches the moonlight like liquid crystal, while his massive jaws close on his chosen target with the finality of fate itself. The other pigs scatter in terrified confusion, their panicked squeals echoing across the water as they flee into the safety of the surrounding forest. The successful hunt marks the culmination of the night's activities, providing the crocodile with the energy reserves needed to maintain his position as the river's dominant predator. As he retreats to deeper water with his prize, the river gradually returns to its nocturnal calm. The ripples fade, and the stars continue their ancient dance across the sky. The night patrol is complete, another successful chapter in the endless story of survival that has kept his species thriving for millions of years. Crocodile versus humans. The morning sun creates a glittering path across the water as the tourist boat rounds the bend, its diesel engine creating a rhythmic puttering that carries clearly across the previously quiet river. The crocodile, basking on his favorite log in the golden light, registers the approaching vessel with the same careful attention he applies to all potential threats or opportunities. His amber eyes, already tracking the boat's progress, assess the situation with the accumulated wisdom of 3 decades spent navigating the complex relationship between his species and the increasingly present human visitors to his domain. The boat itself represents the modern face of human-crocodile interaction, a purpose-built vessel designed to bring tourists safely into crocodile habitat while maintaining the respectful distance that benefits both species. The guide, a weathered man whose knowledge of the river spans decades, spots the massive crocodile immediately and signals the boat's captain to reduce speed and approach, with the caution that such encounters demand. The tourists, a mix of international visitors and local nature enthusiasts, react with a combination of awe and nervous excitement as they catch sight of the enormous predator. Cameras and smartphones emerge in a flurry of activity, their electronic shutters creating a rapid-fire percussion that accompanies the soft murmur of amazed voices. The crocodile's response to this attention is characteristically measured. He remains motionless on his log, allowing the humans to observe him while maintaining the alertness that has kept him alive for 3 decades. The guide's commentary provides context for what the tourists are witnessing, explaining the crocodile's behavior, age, and significance within the river ecosystem. His words carry the respect that comes from years of studying these ancient predators, mixed with the practical knowledge of how to interact safely with creatures that demand both admiration and extreme caution. The crocodile's reputation as a frequent subject of these tours has been earned through consistent appearances and predictable behavior that allows for safe observation. The flashing cameras create brief moments of reflected light that dance across the water's surface, but the crocodile's reaction is minimal. These human encounters have become a regular part of his existence, neither threatening nor particularly interesting. His experience with tourist boats spans years, and he has learned to distinguish between the harmless observation vessels and the more problematic encounters that occasionally occur when humans venture too close to his domain. The historical relationship between saltwater crocodiles and humans in this region is complex and fraught with both reverence and conflict. For thousands of years, the indigenous peoples of the area regarded these massive predators as powerful spirits, incorporating them into their mythology and maintaining a respectful distance that allowed both species to coexist. The crocodiles were seen as guardians of the waterways, creatures whose presence indicated the health and balance of the river ecosystem. European colonization brought a different perspective, one that viewed the crocodiles primarily as dangerous obstacles to human settlement and development. The systematic hunting that followed reduced crocodile populations to dangerously low levels, with many areas that once supported thriving populations becoming virtually empty of these apex predators. The commercial value of crocodile hides added economic incentive to their persecution, creating a situation where the species' survival was genuinely threatened. The transformation of attitudes toward crocodiles over the past several decades represents one of conservation's more remarkable success stories. Legal protection, habitat preservation, and education programs have combined to restore crocodile populations to sustainable levels in many areas. The species that was once hunted to near extinction has become a symbol of successful conservation efforts and a valuable draw for ecotourism. The tourist boat's presence represents this new paradigm: humans seeking out crocodiles not to kill them, but to observe and appreciate them in their natural habitat. The economic value of a living crocodile, through tourism revenue and ecosystem services, far exceeds the short-term profit that might be gained from hunting. The crocodile's tolerance of these regular visits makes him a particularly valuable ambassador for his species. The guide's explanation of crocodile behavior helps the tourists understand what they are observing. The crocodile's apparent laziness is actually energy conservation. His motionless posture is constant alertness, and his ancient appearance connects them to evolutionary history, spanning millions of years. The educational component of these encounters transforms what might otherwise be simple wildlife viewing into opportunities for deeper understanding and appreciation. The interaction is interrupted by the approach of a research vessel, its scientific equipment and professional crew immediately apparent to the experienced guide. The researchers, part of a long-term study of crocodile populations and behavior, have been tracking this particular individual for years. Their presence represents another aspect of the modern human-crocodile relationship, the scientific study that provides crucial data for conservation efforts. The research team's approach is methodical and professional, their equipment designed to gather data with minimal disturbance to the subject. The crocodile's response to their presence is subtly different from his reaction to the tourist boat. These humans have captured and handled him before, and his wariness reflects the memory of those encounters. His body language shifts slightly, becoming more alert and ready for rapid movement if necessary. The capture operation, when it begins, is a carefully orchestrated procedure that reflects years of refinement in crocodile research techniques. The team uses specialized equipment designed to safely restrain the massive predator while minimizing stress and risk of injury to both the crocodile and the researchers. The process requires precise coordination and timing, as any mistake could result in serious injury or death. The crocodile's response to the capture attempt is immediate and violent. His massive tail thrashes against the water, creating explosions of spray that soak the research team and rock their boat. His powerful jaws snap repeatedly, each bite capable of crushing bone or severing limbs. The researchers' movements are precise and practiced, their respect for the crocodile's power evident in every action they take. The successful restraint of the crocodile requires multiple team members working in perfect coordination. Specialized ropes and tape are used to secure his jaws and limbs, while his powerful tail is controlled through careful positioning and additional restraints. Throughout the process, the researchers maintain constant communication, their voices calm and professional despite the inherent danger of working with such a formidable predator. The data collection phase reveals the scientific value of these encounters. The crocodile's length, weight, and body condition are carefully recorded, while blood samples provide information about his health, stress levels, and genetic makeup. The GPS tracking device that will be attached to his back will provide researchers with detailed information about his movements, territory use, and behavior patterns. The crocodile's experience during the research procedure is undoubtedly stressful, but the temporary discomfort serves a larger purpose in the conservation of his species. The data collected will contribute to understanding of crocodile behavior, habitat requirements, and population dynamics that inform management decisions affecting thousands of crocodiles throughout their range. The release process is as carefully managed as the capture, with the restraints removed in a specific sequence that allows the crocodile to recover his mobility gradually. His immediate response is to dive deep and swim rapidly away from the research vessel, his powerful strokes carrying him quickly to the safety of deeper water. The GPS device, now securely attached, will provide a constant stream of data about his movements and behavior. The tourist boat, which has maintained a respectful distance throughout the research operation, now provides its passengers with a unique opportunity to observe the intersection of conservation, science, and wildlife management. The guide's explanation of the research process helps the tourists understand the broader context of crocodile conservation and the role that scientific study plays in protecting these remarkable predators. The crocodile's recovery from the research encounter is remarkably rapid, his robust physiology allowing him to return to normal behavior within hours. His appearance on his favorite basking log the following morning, GPS device barely visible on his massive back, demonstrates the resilience that has allowed his species to survive for millions of years, despite the challenges posed by human activities. The ongoing relationship between this individual crocodile and the human community that shares his habitat represents a microcosm of the broader challenges and opportunities facing wildlife conservation in the 21st century. The balance between human needs and wildlife protection, between economic development and environmental preservation, continues to evolve as both species adapt to their shared future. Memories of an ancient survivor. The afternoon sun hangs low over the water, casting long shadows that stretch across the river like fingers of approaching dusk. Our crocodile, now showing the unmistakable signs of advanced age, rests motionless on his time-worn basking log, his massive form settled into the familiar grooves that decades of use have worn into the weathered wood. The passing years have marked him in ways both subtle and profound, transforming him from the aggressive territorial force of his prime into something approaching an elder statesman of the river's complex ecosystem. His scales, once uniformly dark and pristine, now bear the patina of age, like a well-worn leather jacket. Patches of algae have found permanent purchase on his back, creating a living camouflage that speaks of long hours spent motionless in the water. The scars that mark his hide tell the story of countless encounter-territorial battles won and lost, hunting expeditions that left their mark, the accumulated evidence of a life lived at the apex of the food chain. The most obvious sign of his advancing years lies in his dental hardware. The fearsome teeth that once gleamed white and sharp have become worn and yellowed, some broken off entirely during decades of crushing bone and rending flesh. New teeth continue to grow his species' remarkable ability to replace damaged dentition throughout their lives. But the process has slowed with age, leaving gaps that would have been unthinkable in his prime. His movements, while still possessing the fluid grace that characterizes his species, have acquired a deliberate quality that speaks of joints that have endured decades of use. The explosive bursts of speed that once made him the terror of the river are still possible, but are now reserved for only the most promising hunting opportunities. Energy conservation, always important in crocodilian physiology, has become even more crucial as his metabolism has slowed with age. The river itself has changed around him during his 3 decades of dominance. The seasonal cycles that once seemed predictable have become more erratic, with longer droughts and more intense floods, challenging even his remarkable adaptability. The cast of characters that inhabit his territory has evolved as old rivals have disappeared, new challengers have emerged and been defeated or accommodated, and the constant turnover of smaller wildlife has created a dynamic environment that continues to test his skills. His territorial boundaries, once defended with violent aggression, are now maintained through reputation and strategic positioning rather than constant conflict. Younger males, testing their strength against his legend, often find themselves discouraged by his mere presence, rather than driven away through physical confrontation. The wisdom of age has taught him that not every challenge requires a violent response, that sometimes the threat of force is more effective than force itself. The memories that drift through his primitive but effective consciousness span decades of triumph and survival. The great flood of 15 years ago, when the river rose beyond all previous levels and transformed the entire landscape into a vast temporary sea. His body recalls the sensation of swimming through areas that were normally dry land, the disorientation of navigating familiar territory that had become unrecognizable beneath the floodwaters. The drought of 8 years ago tested his survival skills to their limits, reducing his territory to a muddy puddle that barely accommodated his massive bulk. The memory of that desperate time, the competition for the last remaining water, the gradual starvation as prey became scarce, the ultimate test of his species' legendary endurance remains vivid in his consciousness. His survival of that ordeal stands as testament to the accumulated wisdom of his kind. The parade of human encounters that have marked his later years represents a fundamental shift in the relationship between his species and the bipedal creatures that increasingly share his habitat. The transition from persecution to protection, from hunting to tourism, has unfolded during his lifetime, making him a living witness to one of conservation's remarkable success stories. His tolerance of human observation has made him a valuable ambassador for his species. The countless hunting expeditions that have sustained him through 3 decades blur together in memory, but certain encounters stand out with crystalline clarity. The massive water buffalo that nearly escaped his grasp during a drought year, the family of wild pigs that provided weeks of sustenance, the territorial battle with a rival male that left both combatants scarred but wiser. Each memory is encoded not just in his brain, but in his body, in the scars and worn places that tell the story of his remarkable life. The changing seasons have become a reliable rhythm that his body anticipates with the precision of a biological clock. The subtle shifts in water temperature, the changing patterns of rainfall, the migration of prey species, all of these environmental cues trigger physiological and behavioral responses that have been refined over millions of years of evolution. His body prepares for each season's challenges before they arrive, drawing on genetic memory that spans geological time. The female crocodiles that have shared his territory and his genes over the years represent another layer of memory embedded in his consciousness. Each mating season brought its own challenges and rewards, its own complex negotiations of dominance and compatibility. The offspring that resulted from these unions have long since dispersed to establish their own territories, carrying forward the genetic legacy that represents his contribution to the species' future. The night sounds of the river have become a familiar symphony that his aging ears still interpret with remarkable accuracy. The splash of a jumping fish, the rustle of something moving through the reeds, the distant call of a night bird, each sound carries information that his brain processes automatically. Even as his responses have become more measured and deliberate, the hypervigilance of youth has given way to the selective attention of experience. His relationship with the river itself has evolved from conquest to coexistence, from domination to integration. The water that once seemed like an environment to be mastered now feels like an extension of his own body, a medium through which he moves with the unconscious grace of a creature perfectly adapted to its element. The boundaries between self and environment have blurred with age, creating a sense of unity that transcends the simple predator-prey relationships of his youth. The approaching dusk triggers familiar patterns of behavior that have remained constant throughout his adult life. The gradual cooling of the air, the changing quality of light, the subtle shifts in water temperature, all of these environmental cues prepare his body for the night's activities. His metabolism, though slower than in his prime, still responds to these ancient rhythms with the reliability of a mechanism that has been perfected over evolutionary time. The reflection of the setting sun on the water's surface creates patterns of light and shadow that dance across his field of vision like memories made visible. The beauty of the scene, while perhaps not appreciated in the same way a human might experience it, nonetheless registers in his consciousness as a familiar and comforting part of his world. The aesthetic dimension of his existence, rarely acknowledged in discussions of crocodilian behavior, manifests in his clear preference for certain basking spots, certain water conditions, certain times of day. The deep, rhythmic breathing that characterizes his resting state has become even more pronounced with age, each inhalation and exhalation marking time with the steady persistence of a biological metronome. His heart, that four-chambered marvel that has sustained him through 3 decades of life, continues its steady work with the reliability of a machine designed to last. The circulation of his blood, the oxygenation of his tissues, the countless chemical processes that maintain his life all continue with the same efficiency that has characterized his species for millions of years. As the sun touches the horizon and begins its descent toward night, the ancient crocodile embodies the continuity of life itself. His individual existence, remarkable as it has been, represents just one note in a symphony of survival that has played without interruption since the age of dinosaurs. The river flows on, carrying with it the genetic memory of countless generations, while he rests in the gathering darkness, a living bridge between the ancient past and the uncertain future. The night sounds begin their familiar chorus, and the old crocodile's amber eyes reflect the first stars appearing in the darkening sky. His slow heartbeat marks time with the patience of geological epochs, while the water closes gently around him, embracing him with the eternal rhythm of the river that has been his home, his hunting ground, and his kingdom for 30 remarkable years.